Hey guys, welcome to Great God Debates. This is a page where I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on religion, faith, general belief, um, hopefully offering lots of insight that I've learnt recently, and especially in the last 18 months, nearly 2 years now, and indeed over the past 20 years when I used to be a believer. I no longer am. I used to be a Christian. um, and about 18 months to 2 years ago, I decided, after having a conversation via Facebook with a guy I used to go to university with, that I would do a bit more research, branch out a little bit. And I suddenly, or not necessarily suddenly, but I came to the conclusion through reading different bits of material that actually I had protected myself from ever really exploring the other point of view when it comes to exploring matters of Christianity and belief and evidence, I guess, if you like. For the longest time, I used to think that it came down to a case of modern day scientists had decided that the universe had a beginning and that there was once nothing prior to it, and I sort of decided, well, surely nothing can't create something, which is what lots of believers say, and therefore it's absurd to believe that there was absolutely nothing at all which then decided to create something, because it can't work that way. And anything that created it couldn't have been material, because, well, the material wasn't there because there was nothing. And then I just thought, well, there must be some sort of first cause, whether that's the Christian God or not. There must be something that's outside of our reality, that's not material, etc., etc. And what led me to Christianity, or rather what confirmed my Christian bias, I guess, if you like, if you can call it a bias, is for me it was a case of the fact that Jesus rose from the dead really summed it up for me. I said, well, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, he then had no power, he wasn't God, but the fact that he did, for me, really sealed it. It turns out, though, through some material that I was reading, that scientists have never really actually ever said that the universe was once nothing. And any references to sort of nothing only really sort of mean zero state of energy and stuff like that. There's never been an instance that's been found in science that can suggest that there was ever once a literal nothingness. The way scientists have calculated the age of the universe is by looking at the redshift in the universe and looking at the expansion of that and working it out backwards, and it came to a conclusion that when you work it down and down and down and down and down and down, you eventually get to this thing called, or what's being called, an initial singularity, which is about the size of a sugar cube, maybe a bit less, and that's it. Nobody's ever sort of found that there was anything prior to that. It could well be that although the universe as we know it has had a beginning in terms of space-time, we don't know that this initial singularity wasn't always there. It could well be that it was always there, but at some point it just became unstable and started to expand. Now that is obviously what's known as the Big Bang, and it's still going on now, but the Big Bang really is a poorly named thing, really, because it really unfortunately gives a lot of people the impression that it was an explosion, and lots of Christians, lots of believers think that means, oh, their book must be right because all of a sudden there was light, and it just, that's not what it says. It's a slow expansion over millions and billions of years, but at one point it was initial singularity, which became unstable. Now, I might, over some of the videos, go into a bit more detail about that, but at the moment, all I can say about that really is that nobody's ever really said that it was nothing prior to something. That doesn't almost make sense in a way. It's really inconceivable. It's often Christian apologetics and theistic apologetics that will spin it that way, whether intentionally or not. But that's really not what we found. So we've got no reason to believe that there was ever once a nothing. And it really made me think, well, if I was wrong about that, I could be wrong about anything at all. Or what else could I have been wrong about, rather, I should say. So it really led me down a path of new discovery, and opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I looked into Jesus Christ, the historicity of Jesus, and it transpired for all I was ever told, that the majority of historians believe that the Jesus existed, and that it points towards a resurrection. I've only really ever heard that from theistic sources and Christian sources. But it turns out that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, there are historians that believe that Jesus Christ existed, or rather a guy called Jesus, and that may be so, but it's not necessarily cut and dried like that. It could well be that they are stories, considering when the writings were written, the New Testament was written, decades really after the supposed death of Jesus. And Paul's writings were first, which were very much describing a heavenly Jesus, really. Years later, the Gospels came along and almost made him physical. And that's not to say that it was definitely a case of he was made physical. It could well be that a Jesus Christ, or a Jesus figure rather, existed. But that says nothing as to the divine nature of this particular person. And any external biblical sources that are often named, like Tacitus, Josephus, and other such things. Those are the two main people that are generally quoted, as if they are outside evidence, outside of the Bible evidence. They're really not, because all they ever describe are what believers do. They weren't eyewitnesses. They were born after the supposed death of this Jesus, and they only talk about what believers believe. They don't actually give any evidence towards an actual historical figure existing. So that doesn't exist, and you can't really use the Bible as evidence. I mean, lots of people try to, but the Bible really is the claim and not the evidence. Now, this was alarming to me at the time, because I had a best friend for over 20 years who I really had to come to terms with the possibility that I was mistaken and that it wasn't true. And that was really upsetting time for me. I mean, I've come on along since then, and actually in many ways I feel freer. Bizarrely, it might sort of seem to a lot of people that how could you feel free, but it's a weird thing to try to explain, but I genuinely do, because I feel open to explore new things without sort of fear of, oh, should I really question that, should I not? But I've come to the conclusion that at this stage I have no good reason to believe in Jesus Christ, and I especially have no good reason to believe that a God exists. Now, a lot of people think that's a crazy thing to think, but actually I have no good reason. There's no substantial evidence, as far as I can see, other than inference, okay, to say, oh, how can this possibly be all there is? Look at the skies, look at the trees and stuff. That surely is the work of a designer. Well, no, it's not surely the work of a designer. It's not clear that it's guaranteed. And any sort of links to, well, if a car must have a designer with all the complexities, then therefore all what we see must have a designer. But that's a false equivalence. With a car designer, we could actually physically go and meet the designer. There's a big difference between being able to meet a human being and of something that we have many previous examples of it actually being designed, but we don't really have clear examples of a God existing, and we can't physically meet this particular supposed being to clarify whether it's a design or not. When it comes to design, it's not complexity that tells us of design, it's the comparison to nature. And then we can also compare it to other things which we know are designs. But the universe, we have no other universe other than this one, at the moment at least, maybe always, that we have access to. So we can't compare the findings of this universe with another to determine whether this one is designed or not. There's no clear evidence either way. So as it stands, I can't any longer choose to believe that a God exists. It was upsetting at the time, it's not so much anymore. But I've explored so much since that time, and I want to share as much as I can with you, and I'm excited to do that. So that's my brief introduction. There'll be more videos, guys. Please comment below. Tell me what it is that you have questions for. I will try my best to answer. I don't have all the answers. I'm only human. Very much of an amateur in this. I do lots of research. It could well be that I've missed something. Absolutely. I'm not going to be arrogant and say that I haven't. But please comment below if you've got any questions, if you want to tell me something, if you want to sort of send me a link so I can explore and do some more research. Please feel free to do that. And like this video if you like it. Please subscribe, share the video so we can reach more people, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.